The crisp Chicago air of October 27, 1982, carried the scent of autumn leaves and the distant rumble of the L train. The city was a beehive of ambition, buzzing with whispers of World's Fair bids and the endless dance between civic pride and backroom deals. But for Special Agent Rick O'Malley of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the morning began not with a triumph, but with a growing unease. His 8 a.m. meeting with Mike Chen, a veteran federal auditor, had come and gone. At 8:30 a.m., O'Malley called Chen's office. No answer. Then his home. Chen's wife, Evelyn, answered, her voice already laced with a quiet panic. He didn't come home last night, Agent O'Malley. This isn't like him. Not at all. Mike Chen, 55, was an institution within the Federal Auditing Service in Chicago. With a career spanning 3 decades, he was known as the Ministry's watchdog, an incorruptible numbers man who could sniff out a dishonest ledger entry from a mile away. He lived in a modest but comfortable bungalow in Lincoln Park with Evelyn. Their only child, Sarah, was a bright, inquisitive 9-year-old. Chen's routine was legendary: morning coffee with the Chicago Tribune, a precisely timed drive to the Federal Building downtown, and a desk that was meticulously organized, almost surgically clean. But on this Wednesday, October 27, his coffee cup sat cold on the kitchen counter, his newspaper unread, and his Ford Ltd remained in the driveway. His briefcase, usually by the door, was gone. His wallet and his personal effects were also missing. No note, no message, just an unsettling, profound absence that yawned wider with every passing minute. What began on that unsettling autumn morning was a missing persons case that would haunt the city for more than 4 decades. A federal auditor, on the brink of exposing a sprawling corruption scheme, vanished without a trace. A family was left to navigate a world of hushed condolences and unanswered questions, convinced that their Mike hadn't just left. And most chillingly, the insidious certainty that the enemy wasn't some lone criminal, but a powerful, interconnected web of influential city figures who wore expensive suits and attended the same charity galas. For years, the official file on Mike Chen's disappearance would be sealed, stamped with the conclusion of a voluntary departure. His wife was told he'd likely succumbed to pressure, fleeing to avoid scandal. His young daughter grew up under the shadow of a father who supposedly abandoned them, a narrative that felt hollow and incomplete. The city of Chicago, and the political establishment it sustained, moved on, burying the inconvenient truth under layers of denial. That is, until the digital revolution of the 2020s finally allowed light into the darkest corners of the past. The eventual re-examination of decades-old financial records, using cutting-edge artificial intelligence, would reignite the cold embers of the case, exposing a conspiracy of immense power that reached the highest echelons of Chicago's civic and criminal world. This story lays bare the rot at the core of a system built on quid pro quo, where the greatest threat was not the competitor you could see, but the friend you trusted. Mike Chen was a man of unwavering principle in a city famous for its flexible ethics. At 55, he was a walking testament to a bygone era of public service, a man who still believed in the sanctity of the public trust. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood on the city's south side, he had worked his way through Loyola University, driven by a deep-seated belief in justice. His colleagues in the General Accounting Office, GAO, regarded him with a mixture of respect and a slight, nervous distance. Mike didn't just audit numbers, he audited souls. Mike had a sixth sense for fraud, Special Agent O'Malley would recall years later. He'd stare at a spreadsheet, and you just knew he saw things no one else did. A 0.5% deviation on a bid, a recurring expense to a shell corporation, to him, these weren't mistakes, they were confessions. His commitment was total, but he was not the stoic, detached bureaucrat many imagined. Mike was a devoted husband and father. He and Evelyn, a librarian, lived a modest, comfortable life. Their daughter, Sarah, was the apple of his eye. He would leave the complex world of federal audits at the office door, spending his evenings helping Sarah with her math homework and teaching her chess, always stressing the importance of seeing several moves ahead. He believed in the system, in the ideals of public service, Evelyn would share decades later. He thought it was a flawed but essential tool against greed. He truly believed he could make a difference. But Mike's defining characteristic was an integrity that bordered on stubborn idealism. For the past year, he had been spearheading a highly sensitive internal audit, codenamed Operation Windy City. The official purpose was to streamline federal contracts for infrastructure projects. But O'Malley knew Chen was onto something much bigger. He had been working late, sequestered in a secure office, compiling a dossier that was too sensitive to even discuss over the phone. The night before he vanished, he had a brief, tense phone call with O'Malley. O'Malley recalled Mike's voice, hushed but firm. "The discrepancy is confirmed, Rick. This goes all the way to the top. We need to meet. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. My office." Mike Chen wasn't just auditing, he was hunting. And he had found his quarry. The scene of his disappearance was an exercise in unnerving ambiguity. Evelyn Chen reported her husband missing at 7:30 a.m. She had last heard from him around 11:30 p.m. The previous night, when he called to say he was finishing up some urgent work and would be home late. He often worked into the early hours during a big audit. His car, the Ford Ltd., was still in the driveway. The house was undisturbed. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. His briefcase, however, was gone. His personal cell phone, a bulky early 80s model, was turned off. His wallet and watch were also missing. The official police report, led by Detective Thomas Riley of the Chicago Police Department, noted the absolute lack of disruption. There were no foreign fingerprints, no fibers, no indication of a struggle at the house. The last verified sighting of Mike Chen was a blurry security camera image from a downtown federal building lobby at 11:58 p.m. the night before, showing him exiting the building with his briefcase, looking tired but otherwise normal. After that, he simply ceased to exist. The news of a federal auditor's disappearance sent a ripple of alarm through both federal agencies and Chicago's civic leadership. This was not the work of a common criminal. This was a direct challenge to the authority of the federal government. Within hours, the FBI initiated a joint investigation with the CPD. Special Agent O'Malley was assigned to the case, given his existing relationship with Chen. At the initial briefing, the head of the Chicago FBI office, Agent Robert Vance, made it clear, Auditor Chen was one of our most effective watchdogs. His disappearance, especially with Operation Windy City on his desk, will not stand. We will find whoever is responsible. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken fear. Had the Chicago outfit, already under increased federal pressure, finally escalated to silencing a federal official? Or was it a powerful corporate interest, desperate to cover their tracks? The investigation officially focused outwards. Known mob associates were rounded up and questioned, their alibis scrutinized. Business associates of the Ito Construction Group, the conglomerate at the heart of Chen's audit, were placed under surveillance. But privately, a darker suspicion took hold. The sheer professionalism of the disappearance, the complete lack of a trace, it all suggested an intimate knowledge of Chen's movements, his routine, and the likely contents of his briefcase. He hadn't been kidnapped for ransom, there was no demand. He had simply been removed. The investigation moved with ruthless speed, but it was a carefully choreographed performance. O'Malley's team interviewed dozens of Chen's colleagues. They analyzed his case files, all except the secured documents from Operation Windy City, which Agent Vance declared too sensitive for immediate review by the broader team. Evelyn was questioned for hours, her grief dissected for any sign of complicity. She told them about his late nights, his worried demeanor, and the phone call to O'Malley. Her words were noted and then largely dismissed. 3 weeks into the investigation, Agent Vance announced a breakthrough, albeit a grim one. A former disgruntled employee of the GAO, Marvin "Slick" Peters, known for embezzlement and drug addiction, had been identified as having connections to the outfit and had recently gone missing himself. The official story became that Peters, having been discovered by Chen as a mole, had somehow coerced Chen into fleeing with him, perhaps under duress. It was a flimsy, unsatisfying narrative. Peters was never found. His file was stamped fugitive. The case was officially closed. Mike Chen was quietly removed from federal service, his record marked resigned under duress. It was a lie, neat and tidy, designed to protect the integrity of the federal government from the taint of a potentially compromised auditor. But in the quiet bungalow in Lincoln Park, 9-year-old Sarah, clutching her father's unread newspaper, knew better. Her father had not run away. He had been taken. And even at that tender age, she felt a cold certainty that would lie dormant for years, waiting for her to grow up and uncover the truth. Of course. Here is the second section of The Auditor's Ledger. The 1980s gave way to the 90s, and then the new millennium, but for Sarah Chen, the passage of time did little to dull the sharp edges of her father's disappearance. She grew up in the long shadow of a voluntary departure, a narrative that fractured her family and subtly stigmatized her childhood. At school, whispers followed her, the girl whose father had abandoned them. Her mother, Evelyn, initially resilient, eventually buckled under the weight of the ambiguity and the official pronouncements. She sold the Lincoln Park bungalow, moved to a smaller apartment, and rarely spoke of Mike, finding solace in a fragile silence. "It's better to forget, darling," she would often say, her eyes distant. "Some truths are too heavy to carry." But Sarah could not forget. The image of her father, a man of unwavering principle, simply vanishing, never squared with the official story. The idea that he would abandon his family, his career, and his integrity was a betrayal more profound than any actual crime. That unresolved question became the driving force of her life. She followed her father's footsteps in a different way. While he dissected ledgers, she pursued words, enrolling in Northwestern University's prestigious Medill School of Journalism. She was a natural, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a keen sense for the untold story. Her career began in local news, covering city council meetings and zoning disputes, but her ambition always pointed towards the deeper, darker currents beneath Chicago's polished surface. The story of her father, however, remained a private, almost sacred, quest. She started discreetly. She haunted newspaper archives, pulling microfilm of every article related to the Ito Construction Group, the influential firm at the heart of her father's final audit. She read every word about the city council members and influential businessmen tied to the World's Fair bids, noting their names, their connections, their sudden wealth. She cultivated sources among retired beat cops and former federal agents, casually probing for any lingering rumors about the 1982 disappearance of that federal auditor, Mike Chen. Most offered sympathy, a shake of the head, and the same old official line. "Tough break, kid. Some guys just crack." Agent Rick O'Malley, however, was different. Now long retired, he remembered Mike Chen with profound respect and a lingering frustration. He met Sarah for coffee a few times, a quiet old man nursing a lukewarm cup. He shared his own doubts about the voluntary departure ruling, but admitted he had hit a wall. "They shut it down, Sarah. Higher ups. Political pressure. It stank to high heaven, but we had nothing concrete. No body, no ransom, just silence." Sarah eventually landed a job at a national investigative journalism outlet, known for its tenacious pursuit of cold cases and government corruption. She poured her spare time into her father's case, creating her own meticulously organized archive of documents, clippings, and old police reports. She developed a personal blog, The Missing Watchdog, where she methodically laid out the inconsistencies in the official narrative of her father's disappearance, hoping to attract attention. The blog gained a small, dedicated following among true crime enthusiasts and anti-corruption advocates, but it failed to crack the mainstream. The Mike Chen case was old news, ancient history to a city constantly reinventing itself. Her obsession took a toll. Relationships frayed. Friends found her single-mindedness exhausting. She was a respected journalist, but always with the unspoken asterisk. The woman chasing a ghost. Her breakthrough came not from a human source, but from the relentless march of technology. By 2023, the FBI's cold case unit had implemented a new, cutting-edge AI-driven data analysis program, codenamed Wendigo. Designed to sift through decades of complex financial records, public contracts, and even decrypted communications, Wendigo was capable of identifying patterns and connections that had been invisible to human investigators. It was a digital archaeologist for buried secrets. As a test case, the Wendigo system was tasked with re-examining data from several major corruption scandals of the late 20th century, including the sprawling network of kickbacks and bid rigging that Ito Construction had been involved in during the early 1980s. The AI processed gigabytes of digitized paper records, microfiche, and even old telex messages. Within weeks, it flagged a series of small, regular payments that had flowed from a subsidiary of Ito Construction to seemingly legitimate lobbying firms. These firms, in turn, made regular, consulting, payments to a small group of influential individuals. One of those individuals was former City Councilman Robert "Bobby" Gallo, now a powerful, silver-haired Chicago real estate developer and political kingmaker. The payments, individually, had been small enough to avoid triggering alarms back in 1982, but the AI recognized the pattern as a classic money laundering signature. The payments had started in 1979 and stopped abruptly in October 1982, the very month Mike Chen vanished. A young FBI agent in the cold case unit, David Ramirez, was assigned to the anomalous file. He was too young to remember the specifics of Mike Chen's disappearance, but the name Gallo was notorious. Robert Gallo was a living legend in Chicago, a figure untouchable for decades. Ramirez knew he was on the precipice of something massive. He began a discreet inquiry. He pulled the old FBI and CPD files on Michael Chen. He read the terse, voluntary departure report. And then he stumbled upon Sarah Chen's blog, The Missing Watchdog. He saw the connections she had been shouting into the void for over a decade. He decided to take a risk and contacted her. Sarah, now 50, a seasoned but weary journalist, was wary. Too many false hopes. Too many dead ends. But as Agent Ramirez laid out what the Wendigo program had found, she felt a jolt of vindication that was almost painful. The AI had found the smoke, she had the key to finding the fire. She told Ramirez about her father's secret. Michael Chen, a man of the analog age, had not trusted computers with his most sensitive thoughts. He kept a private, red ledger, a simple, leather-bound notebook where he made notes on his cases in a cryptic, personal shorthand. After his disappearance, the police had searched his office and home, but the ledger was never found. For years, Sarah believed it had been taken by whoever had made him vanish. But in 2010, while going through her mother's belongings after Evelyn passed, she found it. It was hidden in a false bottom of an old toolbox in the garage. The ledger was a revelation. It was her father's voice, speaking to her from the past. The final pages were devoted to Operation Windy City and the Ito Construction Group. He had untangled the entire web of bribery and bid rigging. He had evidence linking the company not only to Gallo, but to a powerful faction of the Chicago outfit, specifically a crew known for persuasion and disposal. Her father had found a cancer at the heart of the city, Sarah told Ramirez, her voice trembling with the weight of her discovery. The ledger contained one entry that had always puzzled her. It was a note from the day before he vanished. It read, Gallo's gift. The final proof. Mont Blanc. Pen. Gallo had given her father an expensive Mont Blanc Meisterstuck fountain pen as a thank you for a minor, early audit resolution, a common tactic to try and buy influence. Sarah still had the pen. It had been left on her father's desk, untouched by the initial police search, perhaps deemed insignificant. She had always assumed the note was just a personal reminder. But her father's mind was not sentimental, it was forensic. Ramirez's eyes widened. He pulled up the original crime scene report for Chen's office. One of the forensic notes mentioned that a single, unusual dark blue fiber had been found on the carpet near Chen's desk, but it had never been identified or matched to anything. Montblanc, Ramirez knew, used specific velvet in their pen cases, a material that could potentially be identified, even after all these years. He also found the record of Robert Gallo's statement to the FBI in 1982. Gallo claimed he had briefly visited Chen in his office late on the night of his disappearance, claiming to express concern about the audit. He said Chen seemed distraught and spoke of taking a long break. It was a small, self-serving detail meant to reinforce the voluntary departure narrative. But it placed Gallo with her father, and it placed the pen at the scene. He didn't just give your father a gift, Ramirez said, the pieces clicking into place. He gave him the evidence. The pen, Gallo's pen, was left at the scene. And that fiber. It was a long shot, but it was the first new physical lead in 41 years. The quiet quest of a forgotten daughter and the cold logic of an AI had converged, pointing to one of the most powerful men in Chicago. The ghost of the auditor was about to demand a reckoning. The collaboration between Sarah Chen and Agent David Ramirez created an unstoppable force, merging decades of journalistic tenacity with the cutting-edge power of federal resources. Moving against a figure as entrenched as Robert Gallo, now a revered Chicago magnate and political kingmaker, required more than just strong suspicions, it demanded irrefutable evidence. The AI's financial data provided the roadmap, Sarah's ledger illuminated the motives, but the physical proof of what truly happened to Mike Chen still lay buried in the past. The key, as Ramirez had surmised, was the Montblanc Meisterstück fountain pen. Securing it from Gallo without triggering his alarm was a delicate operation, given his immense power and the loyalty he commanded. Ramirez couldn't simply issue a search warrant for a 40-year-old missing person case, the political fallout would crush the investigation before it began. Instead, Ramirez employed a strategy of calculated patience and bureaucratic subterfuge. He initiated a discreet, historical review of high-value gifts received by influential Chicago figures in the early 80s, framing it as a compliance check for new federal ethics guidelines. It was designed to appear mundane, a routine administrative exercise handled by a junior agent. A formal request was sent to Gallo's sprawling corporate offices, politely asking for a list and inspection of all significant gifts he had received or given to federal officials during that specific period. Gallo, secure in his decades of untouchability, viewed the request as an irritating formality, a sign of overzealous federal oversight. He instructed his legal team to cooperate fully, confident in his ability to project an image of impeccable integrity. A week later, 2 FBI agents, posing as compliance officers, arrived at Gallo's downtown high-rise office. The Montblanc pen was presented to them in its original velvet-lined box, part of a collection of vintage corporate memorabilia. They logged it, sealed it in an evidence bag under the guise of archival preservation, and walked out. The silent witness to Mike Chen's disappearance was finally in federal custody. The forensic analysis of the pen was a race against time, leveraging technology unimaginable in 1982. First, the dark blue fiber, meticulously preserved from Chen's office carpet, underwent mass spectrometry. Its chemical composition was a perfect match to the specific synthetic velvet used in Montblanc Meisterstück presentation boxes from the 1980 to 1984 production run. This placed Gallo's pen, or at least its packaging, directly in Chen's office. The pen itself held more profound secrets. Under a high-powered electron microscope, the pen's polished black resin barrel revealed what the naked eye could never see: minute abrasions, microscopic nicks, and almost imperceptible patterns. The FBI meticulously retrieved the desktop blotter pad from Chen's office, which had been collected as evidence in 1982 but never thoroughly examined. The pad, protected by layers of archival plastic, bore faint, almost invisible indentations. When a digital overlay compared the unique patterns of pressure and movement from the Montblanc pen's barrel to these indentations, they matched perfectly. It was the indelible scar of the pen having been pressed hard against the pad during a struggle. Most critically, using advanced DNA sequencing, forensic scientists analyzed trace biological material found deep within the pen's cap and nib. It was a mixed profile. Part of it belonged to Robert Gallo. The other part was a clear, undeniable match to Michael Chen. This definitively placed both men, and the pen, together at a moment of extreme physical contact. The final piece of the puzzle came from Chen's personal organizer, which had been found in his abandoned car 2 weeks after his disappearance, its contents deemed inconclusive. A single, cryptic notation, dated the day before he vanished, had always puzzled Sarah: Gallo, the promise. Safe. It was a reminder, a last-ditch safeguard. The FBI re-examined the organizer, now with the benefit of the AI's insights into Gallo's financial dealings. The promise, it turned out, referred to a specific, unrecorded offshore account that Gallo had set up years prior, used to funnel the largest kickbacks. Mike Chen had located it, and he had intended to safeguard the information by revealing it to the authorities the following morning. He had tried to hide a second copy of his full ledger, detailing all of Gallo's transactions and the mob's involvement, inside the organizer. It had been missed in the initial search. When Sarah and Ramirez finally extracted a false bottom in the organizer, they found a microfilmed copy of Chen's full, red ledger, hidden for 41 years. With the forensic evidence unassailable and the full scope of the conspiracy exposed by the AI and the ledger, Ramirez obtained warrants for a massive operation. The arrest of Robert Gallo was a meticulously planned media spectacle, designed to be so public that no political power could intervene. As he stepped out of his sleek limousine to attend a dedication ceremony for a new hospital wing he had funded, he was met not by adoring crowds, but by David Ramirez and a phalanx of FBI agents. The press, tipped off by Sarah, was there in force. The flash of cameras was blinding. Sarah stood among them, her digital recorder held high, her face a mask of resolute composure. She was not a daughter seeking revenge, she was a journalist witnessing the long-delayed reckoning. As they placed him in handcuffs, Gallo's eyes scanned the crowd and found Sarah. For a fleeting moment, the mask of the powerful magnate shattered, and she saw him for what he was, an old, exposed man, finally cornered by the ghost of a man he had silenced 4 decades ago. His defiance, however, quickly returned. "You'll never find him," he snarled at Sarah. He ran. And he's still running. The trial, held in the spring of 2024, was a national sensation. It tore open Chicago's gilded facade, exposing the systemic corruption that had flourished for decades. The prosecution, led by Ramirez, presented an overwhelming case: the AI's intricate financial trails, the re-examined forensic evidence from 1982, the newly discovered microfilmed ledger, and the testimony of several former outfit associates, now old and desperate for leniency, who detailed how Gallo had ordered Chen's abduction. They described how Chen had been taken to a secluded warehouse on the city's outskirts, interrogated, and persuaded to disappear. He was not murdered, but threatened, his family's safety used as leverage. Forced to live under a new identity in a remote location, a ghost in his own life, for 41 years. Gallo's defense, based on denials and legal technicalities, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. After deliberating for only a few hours, the jury returned a verdict: guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to abduct, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. Robert Gallo was sentenced to life in federal prison. He died behind bars 2 years later, a forgotten relic of Chicago's past. For Sarah, the verdict was not a victory, but a profound, almost surreal release. The truth, for so long a phantom, was finally solid. The shame that had clung to her family name was finally lifted. Mike Chen, the disappeared auditor, was no longer a coward who fled, but a hero who was silenced. The case had a lasting impact. It became a landmark in the use of AI for cold case investigations, prompting similar reviews across federal agencies. It also led to a wave of anti-corruption reforms in Chicago, proving that even the most deeply entrenched systems could be brought to account. Sarah, now a celebrated investigative journalist, wrote a best-selling book about her father's disappearance and the subsequent investigation, The Red Ledger: How AI Unlocked Chicago's Darkest Secret. She had found her father, not in person, but in the vindication of his honor. And in doing so, she had helped to clean up a piece of the city he loved.